The night was cold on Colony 9. Most people had gone inside. Shops were closed and only a few security drones floated through the dark, quiet streets. The only sound was the soft hum of the lights hanging above. Grant, a human mechanic, walked back to his home after a long day fixing broken machines at the colony plant. He was tired carrying his tool bag, thinking only about dinner and rest. But then, he stopped. He heard something. It was faint, a soft, broken sound. A cry. He turned his head and listened. Again. It was coming from the alley near the back of the old scrapyard. A child? He walked closer, careful, his boots quiet on the metal path. The crying grew clearer, short, quick gasps, not loud, like someone was trying to hide it. He turned the corner. There, sitting behind a pile of boxes, was a small figure, a child, but not human. Her skin was pale purple, her arms thin like sticks, her hair long and tangled falling over her face. She had big black eyes filled with fear. Her clothes were torn, and her tiny hands held a piece of plastic trash like it was food. Grant knelt down slowly. "Hey, are you okay?" The little girl froze. Her eyes went wide and she backed against the wall, her body shaking. She didn't speak. "It's okay," he said gently, putting his hands up. "I won't hurt you." Still no words, just tears. Grant took a small food bar from his pocket and placed it on the ground between them. "You hungry?" The girl looked at the bar, then at him. Slowly, like an animal testing danger, she crawled forward and grabbed it. She didn't say thank you. She just ate like she hadn't eaten in days. "What's your name?" Grant asked softly. The girl looked at him. Her lips moved. She whispered something. "Luma," he repeated. "Is that your name?" She nodded once. He looked around. No one was nearby. "Where's your family? Your mother?" Luma's eyes dropped to the ground. "She gone?" he asked carefully. Luma shook her head. Then she said something in a soft alien language Grant didn't understand. "Okay," he said quietly. "You're not safe out here." She finished the food bar and kept her eyes on him. "I can take you somewhere warm. Just for the night," he said. "You'll be safe." She didn't speak. But when he stood and reached out his hand, she took it. Back at his small apartment, Grant gave her a blanket, warm soup, and a soft corner to sit in. Luma didn't talk much. She looked around like she couldn't believe what she saw. A roof, light, and no chains. He sat across from her and watched her slowly eat her soup. She kept looking at the door. "Don't worry," Grant said. "No one's coming to hurt you here." Luma blinked. Then she asked in a weak voice, "You take me? I just brought you here so you're not freezing in the alley." "Not sell me?" Grant's heart broke at those words. "No," he said. Softly. "Never." She stared at him for a long moment, then slowly leaned forward and laid her head on the edge of the couch. Minutes later, she was asleep. The next morning, Grant contacted the colony's lost child service and filed a report. No alien child had been reported missing. No mother came forward. Days passed, but still, no one asked for her. Luma stayed with Grant. She didn't cry anymore. She cleaned the dishes without being asked. She sat close to him during dinner. She began to draw on scraps of paper with his pens, strange symbols and pictures of stars. One evening, Grant brought her a small stuffed toy from the market. She stared at it like it was treasure. Then she looked up at him and whispered, "Papa?" Grant didn't know what to say, but something inside him changed. He was no father. He never planned to be. He lived a simple life, machines, tools, quiet work. But now there was a little girl sleeping on his couch, and he couldn't imagine her back in that alley. Then, one night, something strange happened. Grant was walking, home again after work. He passed a shadow in the street, a tall figure in a hood. He didn't think much at first, but when he reached his building and looked back, the shadow was still standing there, watching. The days passed slowly, but Luma was changing. Her eyes were still wide and cautious, but she didn't flinch as much when someone touched her shoulder. She started to hum soft tunes when she thought Grant wasn't listening. She still didn't talk much, but she had begun to smile, just a little. Grant didn't treat her like a guest anymore. She had her own bed, her own cup, and even a small corner shelf where she kept her toy and drawings. He bought her a blanket with stars on it, and every night before sleep, he'd sit beside her and tell her simple stories about Earth, about space, about how machines worked. She listened to every word like it was magic. One day she brought him a drawing. It was made with blue and silver pens. In it she had drawn herself holding hands with a tall figure. The figure had a short beard and carried a wrench. Grant smiled. "Is that me?" Luma nodded and pointed at the word written above it. It said, "Papa," in shaky letters. He tried not to let her see his eyes go wet, but even as their bond grew stronger, something still haunted her. Some nights she woke up crying and calling out in her alien tongue. She would crawl into the living room and sit by the window, looking out into the dark. "Are you looking for someone?" Grant asked one night. She didn't speak. Then she whispered, "Mama." That word sat in the room like heavy stone. "She's coming," Luma said softly. She said, "When it's safe." Grant didn't know what to say. He didn't want to break her hope. But deep inside he worried. What if the mother never comes? Or what if she comes to take her back? That evening, after Luma fell asleep, Grant stayed up late. He sat at his desk and opened a secure terminal. He typed in a request to the Colony 9 security office and used his engineer's clearance to search for alien escape records, missing persons, illegal camps, or fugitives. And there it was. A report. 2 months old. A slave camp from a distant mining world had been shut down. Some captives escaped before authorities arrived. One file showed an alien woman, Tashari, injured, fleeing with a child. The report ended with, "Child separated. Status unknown." It had to be Luma. But there was no sign of the mother since. The next day, Grant bought a small backpack for Luma. He filled it with food, clothes, and a toy. He wanted her to feel like she belonged, like this was her home. He gave it to her after breakfast. She opened it slowly, touched everything inside, then hugged it close. Then, out of nowhere, she asked, "If Mama comes, will you go away?" Grant was silent for a moment. "No," he said gently. "I'll still be here." She smiled. "Good." That night, something strange happened again. Grant was closing his shop when he felt it. That same sense. Someone was watching. He turned, and in the shadows between the buildings he saw her, a figure, not tall like before, this time smaller, thinner, limping. The figure didn't move. Grant took one slow step forward. The figure turned and vanished into the alley. Grant ran after her, heart pounding. Through trash, smoke, and steam vents, he followed the trail, and then he stopped. There, sitting behind a broken crate, was an alien woman. Her face was scratched. Her leg was wrapped in torn cloth. She looked weak, starving, shaking, hiding. But her eyes were the same as Luma's. Grant's breath caught in his throat. She looked up at him, frightened. He took off his jacket and slowly knelt down. "I'm not here to hurt you," he whispered. The woman's eyes filled with tears. Is Luma alive?" Grant nodded. "She's safe. She's waiting for you." Tashari's hands flew to her mouth and her whole body began to shake. She didn't believe it was real. Grant brought her home quietly, after making sure they weren't followed. He helped her into a chair. He brought food and water. When Luma saw her mother, she froze. Then her eyes widened. "Mama?" Tashari opened her arms. Luma ran into them. Both mother and daughter cried like the world had come back to life. Grant stood back. He didn't say a word, but his heart felt full. Later that night, Tashari sat beside him, holding her daughter close. "I thought you'd keep her," she whispered. "I did," Grant said, "but only until someone better came along." She looked at him for a long moment. "You are better than anything I ever hoped for." The next morning, sunlight came slowly through the window, soft and golden. Inside the small home, the air was still. Tashari lay on the couch, eyes open, watching her daughter sleep safely beside her. For the first time in years, there were no alarms, no cold floors, no chains, just quiet. Grant walked in with a mug of warm broth. He had let them rest the entire night. Now he handed her the cup without saying a word. Tashari took it with shaking fingers. "Thank you," she said softly. "Not just for this, for everything." Grant sat across from her. He didn't ask questions. Not yet. She looked down at Luma, then took a breath. "You deserve to know." He nodded. "Only if you want to, tell me." She began slowly. "I was taken 5 years ago. My ship was caught by slavers in Sector 19. They didn't want fighters, only builders and breeders. They put a tag in my arm. Made me work in underground camps with no light, no sleep. We were just tools to them. Some they used for worse things." Her hands clenched around the cup. "I tried to escape twice. Failed both times. They beat me so badly I couldn't walk for a week. The others gave up, but I didn't. Then I had her." Her eyes moved to Luma. "She was born in that cage. I gave her my body's warmth when the nights got too cold. I gave her half my food even when I was starving. I told her stories, even when my mouth was dry and bleeding. She paused. "I promised her one thing. One day I would get her out." Grant's voice was quiet. "You did?" Tashari shook her head. "Not alone. The camp was attacked by a group of human patrols. In the chaos, I grabbed Luma and ran, but I was shot in the leg. I had to leave her hidden while I crawled away." Grant realized something. "The alley. That's where you left her?" Tashari nodded slowly, shame in her eyes. "I was afraid I'd lead them to her, so I stayed away. I watched your home for days, saw her laugh for the first time, heard her call you Papa." She looked at him, voice barely a whisper. "You cared for her like no one ever did." He met her eyes. "She's special. I couldn't walk away." Tashari smiled weakly. "Then you understand why I couldn't either." They sat in silence. But peace is always short in places where evil has long roots. That afternoon, while Grant was out picking supplies, Tashari stepped outside for the first time. Luma held her hand tightly. People on the street stared. Not everyone welcomed aliens on this colony. A few whispered, a few moved aside. Tashari kept her eyes low, but Luma held her head high. At the corner market, Tashari noticed something. A man. He was leaning against a wall, pretending to check a datapad. But his eyes were watching them. She whispered, "Luma, inside." "Now." They entered the market and hid behind the storage shelf. The man didn't follow, but he made a call. Tashari knew that look. She had seen it on guards, bounty trackers, and slave buyers. He wasn't local. He was hunting. Grant returned to find the house locked and quiet. He entered using his code and found Tashari sitting at the table, her face pale. "They found us," she said. He didn't ask how. He just nodded. "What do we do?" she asked. "We don't run," Grant replied. "Not again." He stood and opened a hidden case behind the wall. Inside were old security tools, drones, shields, signal jammers, from his time in the outer sectors. "I never wanted to fight again," he said. "But I will for both of you." Tashari looked at him, her eyes deep with something more than fear. "You took my child in, gave her hope, gave her safety. But now..." She stepped closer, her voice shaking. "I want more than safety. I want a life. A future." She reached out, touched his hand. "Take me too." "Human?" Grant didn't move for a moment. Then he gently closed his hand around hers. You're already mine. Outside, across the rooftops, the man who had watched them earlier clicked his comm. Target confirmed. The mother is alive, and she's with the human. A voice on the other side replied coldly, "Bring them both, dead or alive." The lights were off inside Grant's small home. Curtains were drawn, every window sealed. A small drone floated quietly in the air, scanning for movement outside. Grant worked silently, fingers tapping across a dusty control board, an old emergency security system he hadn't used in years. Tasheri stood near the wall, arms crossed tightly around herself. Her face was calm, but her eyes betrayed something deeper. Pain. Fear. Memories that refused to stay buried. Luma sat on the couch, holding her toy and watching both of them. She didn't understand everything, but she knew something was wrong. Tasheri stepped forward. "I need to tell you the rest," she said. Grant looked up. "Only if you're ready?" "I'm not," she said honestly, "but I have to." She sat beside Luma and took a deep breath. "You know I was taken, but what you don't know is why they wanted me." She looked down at her hands. Small scars covered her wrists. "I'm a Sketh female. Our species was known for building. Crystal technology, clean, powerful, and rare. The slavers didn't want just labor, they wanted minds they could control." She clenched her fists. "They used a device. It sent pain through the nerves every time we refused a command. We built weapons for them. Even parts of ships. They forced us to create tools that could hurt others." Grant's face darkened. "They tortured you into helping them?" Tasheri nodded slowly. "Yes. And when they learned I was pregnant, they tried to take Luma from me. Said she would be more valuable raised as a servant from birth." Her voice cracked, but she kept going. "I told them I'd die first. That night I tried to escape. I stole one of the guards' codes and ran into the outer caves. I carried Luma on my back, bleeding from my leg. I didn't even know where I was going. I just knew I had to get her out." She looked at her daughter, who was now holding her hand. "I thought I'd lost her forever when I hit her in that alley. I told her to stay still, stay quiet. I thought I'd come back in an hour. It took me weeks." Grant sat beside them now, silent. Tasheri turned to him. "You think I'm strong, but I was afraid every single day, afraid that someone like you wouldn't find her, afraid that someone like them would." He placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "But I'm the one who did." She gave him a tired smile. "Yes. And now, they're coming." That night, the man in the shadows returned. He wasn't alone. 2 more bounty trackers joined him. One was tall with half his face made of metal. The other was small and quiet, holding a scanner that beeped softly as they moved through the alleyways. "She's here," the short one said. Inside the house, the warning alarm pinged softly. "They've arrived," Grant whispered. He handed Tasheri a small device. "This sends your location to the colony patrols. Use it only if I fail." "You won't fail," she said. Grant opened a hidden hatch in the floor, a secret tunnel built during the early colony days. "Take Luma. Go down and wait." Tasheri looked at him. "You said we'd face this together. You have to protect her. And who protects you?" He smiled softly. "I've got a few tricks left." As Tasheri and Luma disappeared below, Grant turned off all lights. He sat in the chair by the door holding a shock rifle across his lap. Footsteps outside. A knock. Then a voice. "We know you're in there, human. Hand her over. You'll live." Grant didn't move. They tried the lock. Didn't work. They blasted the door. It didn't open. Grant had reinforced it. But the windows exploded seconds later. The tall bounty hunter came through first. Leaping over the broken frame, Grant fired once, the blast hitting him straight in the chest. The man crashed into the table. The other 2 followed. Shots fired from both sides. Smoke filled the room. Sparks. Fire. Grant took a hit to the side, gritted his teeth, and rolled behind the counter. He reached for a flash bomb, pulled the pin, and threw it across the room. Boom. Everything went white. In the tunnel below, Tisheri held Luma close, flinching as the sound echoed from above. Luma looked up. "Will Papa be okay?" Tisheri didn't answer right away. Then quietly, he promised he would. And humans, they keep promises. Back upstairs, Grant was bleeding. Only one bounty hunter remained. Metal face, slow and careful. "You're stubborn, human," he growled. "You have no idea," Grant whispered, then triggered the last defense drone. It dropped from the ceiling and blasted the hunter straight through the wall. Silence. Finally, Tisheri climbed up with Luma minutes later. The home was half destroyed. Smoke drifted from the furniture, and in the center of the room, Grant sat. Tired, injured, but alive. Tisheri ran to him. "You stayed," she said, tears in her eyes. He smiled, barely able to speak. "Told you. I'd protect you both." She held his hand tight. "I believe you now." 3 days had passed since the attack on Grant's home. The windows were boarded, the walls patched, and the smell of burnt plastic still lingered in the corners. Luma was safe. Tisheri stayed close to her, eyes alert. But Grant hadn't left the house since. Not once. He sat quietly in his chair, arm wrapped in bandages, his ribs still bruised. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw flashes, blaster fire, smoke, and the hunter with the metal face. He had survived, yes. But deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. They wouldn't stop. And they weren't just thugs anymore. Whoever had put the bounty on Tisheri and Luma wanted them gone. Silenced. Forever. On the 4th morning, a message came through Grant's private line. Not from the colony government, not from law enforcement. It was anonymous. "The bounty is rising. A new team is en route. They're not amateurs. Leave now, or none of you will survive." Tisheri stood behind him, reading over his shoulder. She asked softly, "Is it them?" He nodded once. "It's worse this time." She didn't panic. She just picked up Luma and whispered, "We need to run." But Grant shook his head. "Running only gives them more time, more ground." "Then what?" she asked. "We fight smart. We set the trap before they do." That evening, Grant led them to the edge of the colony. Past the metal towers and dusty streets, there was a place no one used anymore. An old defense outpost half buried in the red rock cliffs. It had long been forgotten, power offline, doors rusted. But Grant remembered it. He had helped build it during his first year on Colony 9. Now it would be their shelter, their last stand. Inside, he restored the backup generators, activated the security walls, and placed traps across the outer trail. Laser wires, EMP charges, even old mines. The place looked dead from the outside, but it was ready. Tisheri watched him silently. He hadn't slept in 2 days. "You know they'll come armed," she said. "I'm counting on it," he replied. She walked up to him and touched his hand. "You're doing all this for us." He looked into her eyes. "No, I'm doing this with you." That night, Luma sat beside her mother under the broken skylight. The stars above were clear and endless. She held Tisheri's hand tightly. "Mama," she whispered, "are we going to die?" Tisheri brushed hair from her daughter's face. "No, not while he's here." Luma smiled a little. "He's strong." "Yes," Tisheri said, "but his heart is even stronger." The next morning came without warning. Just before sunrise, the ground began to rumble. Then the sky broke open with the roar of a ship. Dark, fast and sharp like a blade. It didn't dock. It landed hard. Dust flew in every direction. From its hatch stepped 5 figures. Not like the last team. These were specialists. Masked, armored, quiet. Each moved like a predator. They had one mission: extract the targets alive or kill anything in their way. The leader, tall and silent, held a tracking tablet. It beeped once. "They're inside." Inside the outpost, Grant stood ready, rifle in hand. He looked at Tasheri. This time, we don't wait. She nodded. We fight. He turned to Luma. Stay here no matter what. Luma's eyes were wide with fear, but she whispered, Be safe, Papa. Grant gave her a small smile. You made me stronger than I ever was. The first hunter triggered the laser tripwire. A blast threw him into the canyon wall. The others spread out, cautious now. Grant fired the first shot from the tower, striking one in the leg. Tasheri moved through the shadows below, using her old escape skills, quiet, fast, unseen. She struck from behind, hitting one in the neck with a metal pipe, sending him crashing down. Two left. One stormed inside the outpost, straight into a wall of smoke and sound. Luma screamed, hiding. Under a table. The hunter spotted her and moved. But Grant dropped from the ceiling like lightning, tackled him to the ground, and slammed a metal rod into his mask. The last hunter ran, but Tasheri stood in his way. No weapons, just her. You? Want my daughter? She said coldly. Come take her. He charged. She didn't move. At the last second, Grant's drone hit him from above, shocking him into unconsciousness. Silence fell again. The battle was over. Grant collapsed to his knees, breathing hard. Blood dripped from his arm, but he was alive. Tasheri rushed to him, pulling him close. Luma ran to both of them, hugging them with all her strength. They had won. Together. Hours later, colony officials arrived. The new bounty hunters were arrested. Word spread fast, no more attacks, no more threats. The bounty was removed. Tasheri and Luma were granted full human protection under the colony's family law. They were safe, for good this time. That evening, back at the repaired house, Tasheri stood in the kitchen, watching Grant clean the dishes. Luma was drawing quietly near the window. She stepped close to him and whispered, You didn't just save us. You gave us a life. He looked at her with a tired smile. I just did what anyone should have done. She shook her head. No, not anyone, only you. She took his hand. You're our home now. The sky above Colony 9 was clear that night, full of stars. The air smelled like dry stone and dust, but inside the small home, it was quiet and warm. The battle was over. The bounty hunters were gone. And for the first time in weeks, no one knocked, no one hunted, no one watched from the shadows. Grant stood outside on the rooftop, staring at the stars with a mug of tea in his hand. His arm was still wrapped in bandages, but the pain had dulled. A long scar ran across his shoulder, a reminder of the fight that nearly took everything from him. But he was still standing. Behind him, the door opened softly. Tasheri stepped out. She was wearing a human jacket that looked too big on her, but her eyes held peace, the kind that only came when someone stopped running. She joined him silently, standing just close enough that their arms brushed. Luma's asleep, she said. Grant nodded. She deserves to rest, you both do. They looked up at the stars together. There's something about the sky, Tasheri whispered. It always made me feel small. But tonight, I don't feel small. I feel safe. You are safe now, Grant said. She smiled gently. Because of you. He looked at her for a moment. The firelight from the window glowed softly across her face. She didn't look like the woman he first saw. Starving, shaking, hiding. She looked alive now. Strong, beautiful. I didn't think I could protect anyone again, Grant said. I came to this colony to disappear. I thought I was done. But you weren't, she said. You just needed someone to believe in. I found her in an alley, he said. Just a child, scared and cold. But she held on to hope. And that hope changed me. Tasheri's voice became quiet. I used to dream about someone like you. He turned his head. Me? She nodded. Not a soldier, not a hero. Just someone who would stay. Someone who wouldn't trade me or take something from me. Just a man who'd sit quietly and let me breathe. Grant said nothing. The wind was soft and the sky stretched endless above them. Then she whispered, "I want to stay." "You can," he said gently. "This is your home too." She looked down, almost nervous. "I meant with you, not as a guest, not as a burden, as something more." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he placed his mug down and took her hand in both of his. Her fingers fit perfectly. "Tasheri," he said, "I didn't plan this. I didn't expect you or Luma, but now I can't picture a life without you." Her voice cracked slightly. "I want to belong somewhere." He stepped closer. "You already do." She looked into his eyes and whispered, "Then take me, human. Not because I need saving, but because I want to live with you." Grant pulled her into his arms and held her close. There were no more words. None were needed. The next day, the Colony Council made it official. Tasheri and Luma were no longer refugees. They were citizens now. The records showed them as part of Grant's household. And by law, and by choice, they were a family. Tasheri held Luma's hand as they signed the documents together. The cute little girl beamed, hugging both her mother and Grant at the same time. "You're really ours now?" Luma asked with big eyes. Grant smiled. "I've always been yours." That night they had dinner as a family. Real food, real laughter, and a quiet joy none of them had felt in years. Afterward, Luma showed them a new drawing. It showed 3 figures standing under a big, starry sky. One tall man, one alien woman, and one little girl with her arms stretched wide. Above the drawing, she had written in careful letters, "My forever home." Later that evening, Grant and Tasheri sat together on the same rooftop, but this time they weren't watching the stars. In silence, they were planning. "We could build a garden here," she said. "Luma loves flowers." "I can fix the old water line," Grant replied. "Might even grow some fruit. And maybe a small forge. I'd like to try building again." He looked at her surprised. "Crystal tech?" She smiled. "Nothing big. Just something peaceful. Something useful." Grant nodded. "Then we build it together." She leaned her head on his shoulder. They didn't talk for a while. They didn't need to. For once, the stars above didn't feel like reminders of pain or fear. They felt like witnesses, watching the beginning of something new. Morning sunlight crept across the hills of Colony 9, warm and golden. The storms were gone. The streets were calm. For the first time in what felt like forever, peace didn't feel borrowed. It felt real. In the small home on the edge of town, laughter echoed from inside. Luma ran barefoot through the hallway, a blanket tied around her shoulders like a cape. "I am the Space Queen," she shouted proudly. Behind her, Grant pretended to stumble. "Ah, Your Majesty. Don't turn me into a frog." Tasheri stood in the kitchen, shaking her head and smiling at the joyful chaos. She stirred a pot of warm porridge, the smell filling the house. Her arms, once weak and wounded, now moved with grace. Her eyes, once hollow from pain, now sparkled with something soft. Happiness. Luma rushed in and hugged her around the waist. "Mama, Papa said we can build a ship in the garden." Tasheri laughed gently. "A small one, I hope?" Grant entered, a tool in one hand and an old circuit board in the other. "Just a model," he said, "but she says it'll take us to the moon." Tasheri looked at both of them. "Then we better pack snacks." They all laughed, and in that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the scars, not the past, only the now. Later, that day, Tasheri stepped outside alone. The wind brushed against her face and the sun warmed her shoulders. She walked to the edge of the garden where they had started planting herbs and tiny flowers. There was a small stone in the middle of the garden, one that Grant had placed for her. On it, Luma had written in big letters, "Home." Tasheri knelt. Beside it, her fingers running across the surface. She had never known what home truly meant. Not until now. Behind her, she heard footsteps. Grant. He sat beside her in the dirt, resting a hand on hers. "I always thought I was meant to be alone," he said. "Fixing machines, living quiet." Tasheri smiled softly. "And I thought I would die in chains." They sat in silence, both thinking about the roads that had led them here. "Funny, isn't it?" she whispered. "What is?" "That something as simple as kindness can change everything." He nodded. "You changed me, Tasheri. Both of you." She looked at him, voice trembling just slightly. "I thought love was something I'd lost forever, but now I feel it every day." "You haven't lost anything," he said gently. "You've just started again." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "So have you." That night, they invited 2 neighbors over, an old miner and his wife who had once avoided them. But now everything had changed. After the bounty was lifted, after Grant and Tasheri's fight made headlines on the colony net, people started seeing them differently, not as outcasts, but as heroes. People brought gifts. A bed for Luma, tools for Grant, seeds for Tasheri's garden. One woman even offered to teach Luma how to read human books. The girl, once starving and forgotten in a back alley, was now learning how to write her name in 2 languages. And one night, she sat at the table and showed them her best work, a simple piece of paper, 3 stick figures holding hands, Luma, Tasheri, Grant. Above them, in large letters, she had written, "My real family." Later, as stars filled the sky once more, the 3 of them sat outside with warm tea and soft blankets. Luma was asleep in Tasheri's lap, her breathing slow and peaceful. Grant looked up at the stars. "They don't feel so far anymore," he said. Tasheri followed his gaze. "That's because we're not alone now." He looked at her and smiled. "You know, this could have been just a rescue story." She smiled back, but it became something else. "A beginning," he whispered. She nodded. "Yes, the beginning of us." And so, under a sky that had once watched them suffer, the stars now watched something new. A man who chose kindness over comfort. A woman who survived pain and dared to love again. And a child who brought 2 broken lives together with her smile. Together, they had built more than safety. They had built a home. They had built a family.